Today I'm joined by Kendall Miller, a bubbly extrovert. So I have expectations, Kendall. You gonna
extrovert is a service, not just bubbly extrovert. Don't act like I don't sell it, Jerod.
Okay. How do you price such services?
Well, that's complicated because what bubbly extrovert means at every company is a little different, and but it's surprisingly valuable in a world of technology nerds to have. I don't want to say an ounce of personality. There's a lot of people with an ounce of personality,
Sure.
but to bring a truckload of personality,
Right.
is a lot. So yes.
So I imagine you walk into a meeting and everything changes. Like there's like before Kendall and after Kendall. Is that fair?
When people notice it is when I take vacation and I come back and they're like, oh, thank God, because at least somebody's going to talk before the meeting starts. Somebody's going to, interrupt occasionally and right. Put in something bubbly and entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
as a service. As a service to others. It's for everybody else.
It's really, I'm here to be a blessing to the world. And we're surrounded by software engineers and product people. And let's just be honest.
Right.
I love them. I don't want to bash them. My entire world and my entire career has been in tech, basically. Well, most of my career has been in tech. But
well, you wear many hats. One thing I read about you that I'm sure you wrote about yourself is that you help builders of technical products turn them into successful technical businesses. And so I thought we'd start there. What's the difference? How do you help? Why do we need help, etc.?
Well, oh man. So I work with a lot of early stage founders, almost always technical founders. I'm not the technical founder. I have a technical background, but it's been 20 years since I've written meaningful code. I've never been paid to write code, and that's probably a positive thing. I find recursion much too interesting, which as an aside, I do believe that recursion is our way out of the coming AI apocalypse. We just got to get really creative with recursion and they'll just never be able to take over.
They'll get stuck.
Okay. Yeah, see, it seems really obvious to me.
I'm with you.
Anyway,
I thought we just pull the plug, but that's my move. Just pull the plug, but yours is way more diabolical.
The plug is getting more and more complicated as we've created these power sources that are portable, unfortunately.
This is true.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm often working with a technical founder, and technical founders have some particular quirks in general, and most of them seem to be kind of common across the industry. And we can get into some specifics there. But the first and most important thing that a technical founder does is they almost always think they can build their way to a successful company. And that happens occasionally, but it is definitely the exception, because the best products do not win. And I'm going to on a very large company here, but Microsoft exists, and we know that the best products do not win, right? You win because you learn how to sell. Does having a good product help? Absolutely. But there are terrible products out there where the founder has figured out how to sell it, and they have wildly successful businesses. Mm-hmm. And there is an incredibly large graveyard full of the world's best products that nobody ever used, or nobody ever sold. Even sometimes they can get millions of users and they can't figure out how to sell it. So The difference between a technical product and a technical business, a technical product is a hobby until you have people who are paying you for it.
Right. And so you think sales or positioning is what it takes in order to take one to the other, because I think you're right, but you're also crushing my soul. I just want the best thing, just win.
I mean, I could literally, one of the companies that I'm working with right now, the founder built Nomad, and Nomad over Kubernetes. Every company I've ever spoken to that used Nomad and used Kubernetes said Nomad is by far the better product, night and day the better product. And I used to run a Kubernetes consulting shop and helped, I think, the largest user of Nomad migrate to Kubernetes. And the reason they moved, they said, Nomad's better in every way. We hate that we have to do this. But when we get online and we Google for, has anybody ever run into XYZ edge case? There's nobody out there who's ever seen it before, right? And we're the biggest company running it at the biggest scale, and we're sick of that. We just want to go someplace that everybody knows. And it's kind of the same reason everybody still uses WordPress. It's not that it's the best CMS. It's just that it has incredible market share. If you Google any problem, you're going to find a plugin that somebody's already written that already solves your problem because it's been around for forever and it's been wildly successful. So yeah, it's not just positioning though. You can have fantastic positioning. It doesn't mean you're talking to the right people. It doesn't mean you're pavement pounding. And a lot of founders are like, they'll build something, they put it out there and they wait. Oh, no, nobody found it. Well, I could do some advertising, write a few more blog posts, or I bet if I built this other feature, then they're gonna love it. And you know, I mean, it's just so much easier to build. And I know this. I run a couple of companies myself, and I would always rather just keep building because it's more fun than go sell. It's hard to sell, especially early on, because you're like, hey, I know you've never heard of us and we have no credibility and you don't know anyone that can vouch for us. And also our product's really good, we swear. Right? So
right.
It's hard.
So how do you help these technical people? They hire you and you help them, or is there general advice that could apply to people that aren't necessarily hiring your services that they could walk away with and say, okay, obviously getting out there, you said pounding the pavement. I don't know what else you said, but I'm sure there are other steps in there that I could write down and do. Like, what are some actionable steps?
So the first thing is, you've heard it said, first-time founders build, second-time founders sell, or there's a lot of different variations on that, but it's a common thing. The selling, what makes a salesperson is not that they've learned this trick. Oh, if I say this in this way, then they're going to buy. Like, there are a few tricks like that. I've learned a few that I've been surprised actually are very effective, but it's not like I'm going to turn my close rate from 5% to 90% because I learned to be a sleazy dirtbag sales guy, right? The truth of sales is, number one, it's a numbers game. You knock on enough doors with the world's worst vacuum, eventually you knock on a door where somebody's vacuum just broke and they have company showing up in a half an hour and they are stressed the heck out and they don't care how bad your vacuum is, they need it right now, right? So at the end of the day, it is just a numbers game. Having a great vacuum that does a great demo helps you sell more vacuums, but you still got to knock on a million doors. What makes a salesperson is they've knocked on every door in the neighborhood. They have no idea what to do next, and they wake up and keep going. And that's not in the DNA of the average technical co-founder or technical founder. And so it's a thing that they have to learn the hard way, and almost always by the hard way, without I'm putting in air quotes. What that means is they failed once. They built a company and they couldn't get enough people to use it, or they reached a couple million and they needed to reach a lot of million because they were venture backed. And then they realize in the second round that they have to go bigger, harder. So what do I do? Well, so you asked a couple questions there. First of all, general advice: sell. Sell it before you build it. Also, build something much, much smaller than you think, because a lot of companies go build a product this big, right? Huge. And then they find out after talking to everybody that the product should go this way and 10% of it is relevant. And it's really hard to pivot when you've boiled the ocean already, right? If you build a product that really should be a feature and you could build in a weekend, then when you go out and talk to the market and find out, oh, actually the interest is over in this direction, or I need to build it that direction, it's not that stressful to pivot. It's not that hard. You can listen to the advice from customers and actually build a thing that they want. My favorite companies are the companies that when I talk to technical people, they're like, why does that even exist? I can build that in a weekend. Sure, you could build that in a weekend. You'd build it poorly. It would be not feature rich. And you wouldn't be able to sell it because you have no design sense and you don't know who to talk to, right? But if you build it in a weekend and then you can add on in the right direction without being stressed about it because you already boiled the ocean. So that's the first thing. Build a lot smaller than you think. Sell it a lot sooner than you think. If you can't get somebody to pony up money for it really early on, it's not going to be easier when it's bloated and big and heavier and you've put 10,000 times more of your opinions into it. The other thing that I see a lot of technical founders do is they don't do the math. Like, you have to build a business around something that actually makes sense, right? One technical co-founder I worked with a long time ago built a B2B SaaS product that engineering leaders were going to buy. And he priced it as such that I was talking with him saying, well, now hang on a second. You've sold to one of the world's biggest companies and it's a $5 a month deal. Well, more engineers are going to take it up. Okay, but how many of these do we have to sell before you can earn a living? right? And this is a bootstrapped business. It wasn't even venture backed. And he's sitting there and doing the math and, well, I guess I got to sell about 10,000 more, right? And so like, either you can sell it for $500 a month or $1,000 a month or $10,000 a month or whatever it's going to take you to actually get to the sustainability that you need within a time frame that makes sense, or you need to not sell it. But selling it for $5, patting yourself on the back that you got a success story and finding out that you could do this for 25 years and you might be making $2,000 a month, that doesn't work, right? So there's a lot of things that people miss, but
how do you pair these two ideas? Idea number one is build something small and focused and arguably, because of those two things, not all that valuable, and builds and charge $500, $1,000, like charge a lot, build a little. It takes a lot of confidence to do something like that. Like, well, I got this little thing that does one thing. It's going to cost you a lot. It seems like one or the other, but are you saying you can accomplish both?
So first of all, you can get people to buy something that you haven't built. And there's a difference in the conversation between, is this interesting to you and would you pay for it? There's a lot of people in tech who will say, oh, that's super interesting, I love it. But that's different from, I would happily pay for that. So there's a little bit of nuance there. But how do you jive those two things? That's the hard part about picking a niche, right? I mean, there's times where you need to go boil an ocean and build, say, a cloud, right? Before you're going to have adopters. But it's not like Amazon started with a cloud. It started with compute, right? And then found out all the other things. And so when you're going to go compete with the world or build something new and interesting in the world, I mean, there's a reason they call it an MVP. Viable is not the smallest I'm capable of building in minimum viable product, right? Viable is the smallest thing that I can get somebody to buy is really how you should think about that. And buy at a reasonable price. But if somebody says, hey, I really need XYZ problem solved, you say, well, what's the first bit of that problem that I could solve for you today? And you'd sign on a dotted line because it would be valuable enough to move. And can I go build that in a weekend? And a weekend is a little hand wavy, but maybe it takes you a week. But if it takes you 9 months, the chances are more likely than not you built the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me obvious that there are unicorns out there, but most technical people do better if they're paired with somebody salesy, designy, extroverty, perhaps. Someone like yourself. Like perhaps you and I could team up and build a good business because I have builder chops and you have sales chops and we jive, etc. That combination is really hard to find. It might be easier to find a spouse at this point. So, I mean, seriously, so many people.
Yeah.
Is there a Tinder for co-founders? Probably there is.
There is, yeah.
Is there? I was gonna. I mean, maybe that's my next question.
There's a couple of systems out there for.
Where do we meet?
I mean, even Y Combinator has like a co-founder matching setup, I believe, and there's a couple of different places that do something similar to that.
Yeah.
But I think the hard part is finding the bubbly extrovert who's technical enough to understand the product at a deep enough level to talk coherently about it. Now, for a lot of those technical co-founders, they never really understand it at a deep intellectual technical ability. They understand it in the same way that you learn a foreign language, right? If you're around it long enough, you can kind of sound like the other person, right? And you're just kind of BSing, but you start to sound like a native if you've spoken it long enough,
right?
So it is difficult, but what I think is interesting is that there are VCs that back an awful lot of technical founders without that business person and just assuming that they'll figure it out. But I mean, this morning I have an old sales leader that I worked with. I'm trying to be vague here, who is working with a technical founder who the VCs told him, we will back you if you hire a sales background co-founder, because we don't believe that you can make this go on your own. So that is a thing that does happen.
Yeah. And there's currently a lot of business people, or as I sometimes call them, idea guys, who are drooling right now over the prospects of vibe coding their way without a technical person to sales success. And I think both those routes are probably fraught. So how did you get it? How did you
To
get
say the
into
least,
this?
yes, Jerod. They
How
are
did you
both
get
fun.
into this then? How did you, as a non-technical person, or I don't know, what's your background? Were you a computer science major? Probably not. Like, how'd you get in, and then how'd you eventually learn the language?
So it is complicated. So my distant background is technical. I started writing code in 5th grade, and my first programming language was awk, which don't start with awk.
Nice.
Would be my encouragement. I went from awk to
Don't
basic.
finish with awk either. Yeah.
Don't finish with awk either. And I worked up, and I spent the most of my time with C++. I entered college as a sophomore almost entirely with computer science credits that I had taken in college classes and APs in high school, and with the assumption that I was going to study computer science. But I made a decision late in high school. I think I like people better, and computers completely consume me, and so I will fail at choosing between the two. So I do have the technical background. I worked for a startup in 2004 in Denver that built Twitter about 5 years too early. Then I left the field completely. I got an English literature degree, 2 masters in the history of religion. I moved to China and worked for a nonprofit for 10 years. So wildly different background happened for a while. But when I moved back to the States about a little over a decade ago, I was the first hire at a small startup, not realizing I was the first hire because I didn't know to ask, do you have money and do you have people that work for you? I know now, but
What'd you ask them? Like, are you hiring? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, he offered me more money than anybody else offered, and I took the job because nobody knew what to do with me. They're looking at my background in China going, what the heck is this, right? So I did sales for them. We succeeded at sales. I hired a sales team. I hired a marketing team. I took over operations. I actually ended up taking over engineering when the CTO made an engineer cry, and then eventually took over the company, and we sold the company. So it's that experience where I did literally everything at the company over the course of about 8 years, that put me in a position where I could go out. And then I started meeting with other technical founders. I ended up on the board of another company in Denver that has grown, been successful, had a big exit to PE about a year and a half ago. Ended up just advising a number of different places. And, I say advising, it sounds like they're paying me in equity or cash money. And most of the time it was just me helping somebody out. Hey, I've been there before. Let's talk about this. Hey, I've got somebody to refer your way. Hey, talk to this person, talk to that person. And then,
Pure
they end up coming back. So is it pure altruism? I mean, that makes it sound like it's ever that clear of a thought. No, I think networking has network effects, right? When I moved back to the States from China and I logged into Slack at this new company and found out that I was the only employee, I panicked and I was like, yeah. And so I was like, well, I better go network because I'm going to be out of a job in no time. And so I went out and just networked like crazy. Who can I meet? I'm going to be genuinely interested in anyone I can find. And, finding out that led to hires. The first sales hire that I brought in was that. The first engineer that I brought in was that. Like that led to all kinds of hires, that led to sales, that led to eventual business opportunity. I mean, a guy I hired 9 years ago is the guy that I'm in business now with, that I have opportunity to talk about this. I make a liquor called Friday Deployment Spirits. This is our generative A rye. It's a rye whiskey. We also make a gin called Force Push Gin, focused on the tech world. Anyways, it's a guy that I hired 8 years ago because I met him at a meetup. I needed a person who did exactly what he did. We worked together great for a little while. And then years later, we ended up starting a business together, right? So networking has network effects. So when I'm out meeting people and I'm genuinely interested in getting to know them, which I am because I find people fascinating, I find, hey, you need a job and I know somebody who's hiring for a you. And if I refer you to that person, and, I don't take, a lot of people have asked me because I refer a lot of people for jobs. So a lot of people have asked me, like, why don't you take a recruiter fee? I would probably make a lot more money if I did. But as soon as I monetize the network directly, the network loses all of its value. And so because I've referred a person over here, that director of engineering now owes me a favor, right? And so now I take a job at this new company and I think that this product might be relevant to that director of engineering. And I don't mean owes me like, it's not quid pro quo, but when I call him and say, hey, would you take a look at this? He's going to say yes, because I helped him hire the last 5 people he's hired. Right. Actually, I mean, it's a good friend of mine in San Francisco who got fired from a very big company. I actually don't think he got fired. I think he left. I don't know. I don't know what happened. Very large company. And, you know, he's one of these guys that's too big of a big cheese, like VP at very large organization. And nobody in my network is the CEO of Microsoft, right? Like I know a lot of people, but I don't know those people. And so I only know one very large cloud company's execs, and I wrote them and said, hey, this person came available on the market. He's more expensive than almost any network that I know, so you're the only place I can refer him to. Well, they just hired him. They just actually, I found out yesterday. So now there's a C-level executive at one of the largest cloud companies in the world that, you know, I'm not saying owes me one, but will definitely pick up the phone when I call. And so those kinds of things just add up, right? And so what ends up happening is somebody pings me, has a question about, hey, I'm building XYZ. Here's why it works. Here's why it doesn't. Can I get some feedback? I look at it. 70 to 80% of the time, I just all over their ideas. Sorry, I'm not supposed to curse here because you're going to bleep them out. I say bad things all about, I shut them down. I tell them it's a terrible product. Well, I worked for a religious organization in China for 10 years, Jerod. And one of the things I decided when I moved back was that I was going to curse more. And I've been wildly more successful than I anticipated. Okay. I end up all over their ideas. But about 30% of the time or 20% of the time, I'm like, wow, this is actually really interesting. And here's 3 or 4 companies I think might need that right now. And I go make those intros. Those turn into meaningful conversations for those companies. And that company comes back and says, can we hire you? You did that really fast and really easy. And, my goal is not to make sales. I don't want to be sales guy. But I can go in and get those first few product feedback conversations. I can help you build a sales team. I can help you build a marketing team. I can help you understand what you're doing wrong. But even then, I mean, honestly, a huge percentage of what these guys are doing wrong is like, they don't know that you got to show up on time to an interview, right? It's the little things. You got to communicate. Yeah, right. Because you've been an engineer in a hole where the thing that was valued was that you outputted code and you were really good at that. And that's different than what it takes to run a company and to get people rah-rahed behind you and get people excited about the vision for where you're going and give people the freedom to go build on their own. And I'm talking for a long time here, as I tend to do.
No, that's fair. I'm having lots of thoughts. One of them was, have you seen the episode of Friends where Joey tells Phoebe that she cannot commit a selfless deed? And so the entire episode, she goes about trying to have a selfless act. Because I asked about, is it pure altruism, which is a stupid question because there's no such thing as pure altruism. Because it's like, no, but you try to do a selfless act and somehow it comes back to you anyways.
Yes. Isn't when she ends up carrying a baby on behalf of somebody but realizes she's going to feel good about it?
Yeah, I mean, she felt good at the end of the day. It's like, no. And she was very angry. I love that particular setup. The other one is you say you don't want to be a sales guy, but I'm trying to figure out what kind of guy you want to be. Do you like 0 to 1 and then move on? Are you just trying to help out where you can? Like, what part of it excites you?
So pseudo sales is always going to be a part of my job, right? I'm always going to be talking to people. It's always going to lead to sales conversations. When there's a lot of times I end up at a new company and somebody in my network pings me and says, hey, that's kind of interesting. Can I talk to you about it? And it turns into a sales conversation, right? I don't like being sales guy because then I have to hassle my network, check in, follow up. And so I want to hire somebody else that's going to do those kinds of things. So it doesn't have to be Kendall hassling somebody. I don't want to hassle. I don't mind if a salesperson who works with me or for me is hassling the hell out of one of my friends. That's their job. But it doesn't, if it's affecting my relationship with that person, that's a problem, if that makes sense. So what do I want to do? I mean, that's the messiest part. That's the hardest part for me every time, Jerod, is because what excites me is just solving business problems, right? Like I like getting in, finding out that there's things that are a mess and just going and helping solve it. So, I mean, to give you an example, like in the last 2 days, I've written job descriptions. I've come up with prospecting lists. I've interviewed people for, marketing roles, for operating roles, for sales roles. I'm interviewing for a CEO right now. I touch every single part of the business because I'm comfortable in almost all of it. I'm not going to go review a PR. That's the one spot that I'm probably not going to be useful. Although at previous company that I was running, I would about every year go issue a PR just to scare all the engineers. And, it was always something small, like a typo or something in documentation. But
so you have your spirits company, but I'm thinking, why not apply your talents at something that you're building for yourself or with somebody versus helping other people? Is this one of the things you do is building this spirits company?
So there's a bunch of things I do. So what I get paid for directly, I work with a cloud company called Civo out of the UK. I work with an AI company called Tensorlake out of San Francisco. And then I'm on the board of a company called FusionAuth. That's, think an Auth0 competitor. But then I run a couple of things myself. So there's the spirits company I have a business partner with. We make a gin and a whiskey, and we're looking at some other interesting things that we may do next. Had a really crazy opportunity come up yesterday that it's too early to talk about, but is exciting. I run a network of CTOs globally called CTO Lunches. So we have about 1,600, 1,700 CTOs worldwide. We put on lunches all over the world. So that's nice because that is a way that builds the network. Honestly, what I like about it is I get to fly places on the company dime, eat lunch on the company dime. And now I'm in the liquor business. So liquor's, a company expense. And, there's all these different things. But CTO Lunches is another business that I own and run. I co-own. But I do think that CTO Lunches has the capacity to get to... If everybody fired me tomorrow, I think within 6 months I could make enough money off of it to make it my full-time gig. But I like touching other things enough that I'm not walking away.
Yeah. So how does that one make money? You charge
I'll
them?
come back to that. There's one last thing that I do also is I do have a advisory group called Grow Big Advisors, where I've paired together with a handful of friends to do this sort of startup advising. They have slightly different skill sets than me. One's a sales leader, one's an engineering leader. One's got the marketing background. So it's different things, but in exchange for a small bit of equity, we provide this kind of just advisory rather than hands-on. So that's a little different. So those are the things that I'm building for me.
So you have a lot of stuff going on. You're not just helping other people with their businesses.
I stick my fingers in a lot of pies. Yes.
Right. So why the spirits pie? And
I had just come back into town after some time away, and I was meeting with 4 old friends, and we were sitting around at a brewery talking about, why can't I buy a bottle of whiskey called I Did Sock 2 and all I got was this bottle of whiskey? Or, the list of names was immediately very long. And the Rishi, my business partner, and I stuck around after the other 2 guys left, and Rishi goes, well, Kendall, I think this is maybe a good idea. And I said, well, Rishi, I think this is a good idea. And he goes, well, I'm not messing around. I said, well, I'm not messing around. He said, well, I kind of think we should do it. And I said, well, I kind of think we should do it. And the next day I was on the phone with the distillery saying, hey, how do I buy a whole bunch of liquor if I want to do this? And we ended up in a partnership, and it's worked out.
So do you think like targeting, so I've noticed this as a trend, which is why I think it's A, probably a good business, and B, a relatively easy one to get into is, every celebrity has their tequila or their whiskey or their gin named after them or whatever it is. Or it's like branded alcohol for this celebrity and
aviation gin. I'm Ryan Reynolds. Thank you, Jerod. No, I didn't want to make the connection, but since you did, we can also talk about my football team in a little bit, but
there you go.
Anyway, sorry, keep going.
No, so I've noticed that. I'm like, well, this must be lucrative and relatively easy because you're basically just branding, aren't you? You're not opening a distillery, and you just said you went and bought a bunch of whiskey, right? Yeah,
well, so the whiskey and the gin are made for us. It's not white labeled something else. So a lot of places will go, man, I don't know if you want to get me talking about liquor, but we can talk about liquor. So the vast majority of distilleries are buying a base liquor from Indiana because that's where a huge percentage of the distilleries are for #reasons. The alcohol laws in America will blow your mind that are left over from Prohibition. So anyways, our distillery makes it from grain. So it's not a base spirit that's just distilled again 9 more times like Tito's does and then brags about it. 9 times distilled. How bad was what you started with that you had to distill it 9 times? And it's distilled once because it's a fantastic product.
Okay.
Anyways, and it's made for us. It's a recipe for us. So it's different. It's contract distilling rather than just white labeling something else.
Right.
But yes, I did not open a distillery. I do not want to open a distillery. I just handle once it's in the bottle. And I have to buy the bottle, and distribution's a gigantic pain in the butt because of American liquor laws.
Because of American laws. So I'm thinking then like of course I'm target market, right? Because I'm a nerd and like generative AI like lands perfectly on me. But there's not very many.
Also,
like how many
really good whiskey, Jerod.
Well, that's fine. That's all well and good. But the naming is what I care about. Like you're targeting alcohol at technical people, basically. Isn't that like a small cross section of the world? Are you limited?
Well, that's why one bottle is $1,400.
What's your TAM? Oh, okay.
No, I'm kidding. It's
you just sell it to your CTO lunches. That's your entire market.
The whiskey is 125 and the gin is 95. So it's not cheap. It is a luxury item. Yes. It is a very, very good item. So let me be clear about a couple of things. One, I would have totally done this exact same thing with a terrible distillery and a terrible end product because I think the marketing has legs. We have a fantastic product that I can't believe how good the product is. I actually think the gin is the best gin I've ever had, and I am a gin snob, and I don't feel like I can say that about my own gin, but it is so very good. And I can say it because I didn't make it. I had some input into the recipe, but that's all. And the whiskey is also very, very good. So it is a luxury product and it costs a lot of money. And I'm selling it to a group of people who have a lot of disposable income, like to make jokes like this. My thought is not that Jerod will become a daily drinker of generative AI. My thought is sometime in the next year, Jerod is going to want to give a gift to somebody he knows in tech, and he's going to ship a bottle of generative AI. Or, director of engineering at XYZ company is going to buy his team all a bottle of whiskey for Christmas, and they're going to buy generative AI. That's my goal. Is that it's not? I don't think anybody's going to buy a $95 bottle of gin, and even though it's a very pretty bottle of gin and it says "Force Push" right there on the label, and it's Friday Deployment Spirits, Jerod. It's funny.
It is funny.
I still don't think it's going to be anybody's daily drinker.
Gotcha. Well, I just wanted to tee up your sales pitch and see how you'd do.
How did I do? Can you give me a rating?
I would drink it. I mean, I don't know if I would. $1,400 that's a tall order. I'm not a CTO or anything though.
It's not $1,400. I want to say again, $125 versus $95.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say was $1,400?
No, I started at $1,400 to screw with you, so that the $125 that it actually costs would stress you out less.
Oh,
see,
man,
talk about sales tactic. Yeah, 100%.
So sell me some of your other, I won't say used car salesman tactics, but just, what are the winners where you can just say something and it'll work? You said you got a couple of those. Yeah.
So a couple of things that I think are really interesting. If you're selling to technical people, don't capitalize their name when you send the email. Make some spelling mistakes. Yeah, otherwise it looks like it's a mail merge, right? And if you can just do the littlest thing to make it look like this was actually written by a human, and if you can write it by a human, it's even better. But you misspell somebody's name, you know how much more likely they are to respond to you? Because they're like, oh, this asshat didn't just plug it into a CRM and send me a mail merge, right? They're actually reaching out to me.
You don't pay attention to details?
100%. And sometimes they respond with like dude, come on, you could do better. But they responded. So
fair.
So first of all, there's little things like that. Even if it's just lowercase the name, make a spelling mistake in your message so it doesn't look like it was sent by a machine. Nobody wants the machine outreach. That's number one.
All right.
Number two, one of the most interesting things is every company needs to know, where do I start? Founders always underprice their product. Okay. I do this myself. You weren't willing to pay $1,400, but $125 seemed cheap to you once I got back to it. I probably could have sold the bottle for $200 and Jerod might've bought it. I don't know. I'm probably hand waving, but founders always underprice their product. And one of the most important things for fixing that is finding out what are people's budgets, right? So how much am I saving you? Those kinds of conversations, but they're really hard to have. So there's this tactic called the bucketing method. And so what I say is, Jerod, I've got a nice bottle of whiskey here, and I want to put you into. It's a 2025. You're gonna like the way that it drives and feels.
That was a good year.
It was a good year, and how much you got to spend on this, Jerod? You hoping to spend $5 on a bottle of whiskey? You hoping to spend $100 on a bottle of whiskey, or do you have $5,000 to spend on a bottle of whiskey? And there's something about that last number being so big it's outrageous that almost everyone, almost every time, will go, well, it's not $5,000. I was thinking more like 50. And okay, great. Now I've got a ballpark for what was in your head. So this method, and you name a number. You name a number twice as big, 10 times as big. And that last number has to be so outrageous that it makes them get mad. And then they'll almost always come back with what was in their head. So that's called the bucketing method. That's an interesting thing. And then there's one last one, which just in general in sales, if you can ask a question like, if this existed and it was perfect for you to meet your needs, something like that, what would it look like? And now you're going to sell the product to me. And if I can sit still and shut up and let you just sell to me, the less I say in a sales call, the better you're going to feel about what I'm selling, even though I haven't told you anything about it.
How do you mean I'm going to sell it to you? Because I'm going to describe what it would be, and then you're going to say that's what it is, or what do you mean?
It depends on what you can't say, oh, well, that's exactly what it is, but you can go back with, how do I say this? Here's a concrete example that'll be relevant to everyone in your audience, even if they're not founders. Interviewing. When you're interviewing, you're trying to sell yourself, right?
Yeah.
The worst possible thing you can do is go into an interview and say, tell me what you need. And they list 50 criteria. And then you try to go through those 50 criteria and say, here's why I meet every single one of those criteria. You will fail because you don't. You're never exactly what they have in mind. Never, ever, ever. Right? Yeah. So if you can say, hey, in your perfect world, what are the problems that I would solve? Not who exactly am I? Right? I'm going to show up on day one. I'm going to wear this color. I'm going to talk to this person and do this thing. But what is the problem I'm going to solve? Then they start selling to you the problem that you're going to solve for them. And at the end of the conversation, you say, well, it might not be exactly what you have in mind, but here's how I'm going to solve your problem anyways. And keep it nice and short and sweet. And you convince them that what you've just said meets their criteria. Now they have just sold you to themselves. And that sounds super sketchy. It's really not that complicated. There's one book on this that I encourage people to read. It's called Spin Selling. And spin is not like I'm going to spin you into, it's an acronym for something. But the one useful thing they talk about is this bit of like, get the other person to be pitching you instead. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a small thing and it's easy to lose track of. But literally interviews is like the one place where particularly technical people get caught up. Like, yes, I'm exactly that. I've written Python for 17 years exactly like you asked, and I've known Kubernetes since, Wozniak was born. Please hire me.
Well, you mentioned Kubernetes. I know you've dabbled in the cloud, or you're kind of hanging out in like the infrastructure section of technology. Is that really where you, besides the alcohol section, what other aisles do you hang out in? Are you in the infra aisle? Are you in the cloud? Where do you hang?
So, I'm currently working with this company, Civo, which is interesting because Civo is a cloud company. Think an AWS or a Google. What they're Kubernetes first. What makes them different is a couple things. One, it's UK based, which right now happens to be really good for business for hashtag I don't know reasons. But the thing that's also interesting is they will ship you the whole software stack. So it'd be like if you used AWS for a few weeks and you're like, hey guys, this is great. Can we have it? Right? And then AWS just shipped you AWS. So Civo will do that. You can buy the software stack. They'll also ship you a hardware appliance where you can throw it in a rack. So what's interesting to me about that is the 10 years that I was in China, I basically missed the data center world because in 2004 at that startup I mentioned that built Twitter a little too early, we had some server rooms in the back that we would shut down a machine at a time and install the newest version and then shut down the next one and install the newer version and or we put up a website that said down for scheduled maintenance, right? You remember those? And then when I came back, it was cloud and blue-green deployments, and I missed the whole data center world. So Civo's kind of interesting to me because it's my first time touching anything data center related. And, not that the customers necessarily are all doing that. Most of them are probably just using our cloud, but I find the data center bit really interesting, especially as people are starting to flee the cloud. Yeah. But so that's one bit. It does tend to be infrastructure. About a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, I went and raised money to start an AI startup. So I did plan to do an AI startup. My co-founder, after the VCs said we're ready to write the check, and my co-founder called me and said, so I think my wife's going to divorce me if I do this. So we shut the whole thing down.
Really?
Still good friends. But that was in infrastructure because I do think there's some interesting infrastructure problems around AI in particular that are still unsolved. The reason infrastructure is interesting is because, a single SaaS product with a single SaaS vertical, you either hit the market perfectly or you don't. With anything infrastructure, you get to ride the waves because what you're selling is the pickaxes, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not even pickaxes, it's blue jeans. So it doesn't really matter if it's gold rush or we're cutting down a bunch of trees and clearing the forest. Everybody needs blue jeans. And so that's the fun thing about infrastructure is you're solving the problems that everybody needs to go solve their problem. Right. It's an easier bet. So I find that more interesting.
And there really aren't workarounds. I mean, you're going to need it or you're not going to need anything. Like infrastructure is going to be there, whether it's rented, bought, cloud, on-prem, like it has to be there in some form. And so, like you said, it is kind of more like the blue jeans where there's not going to be really there might be a down market, but never a no market.
Well, and so then the thing that's relevant here that I think is interesting is part of what was fun about the Kubernetes boom 10 years ago when I was first involved in it is it's like there's this new kind of workload, a container. And it's not really that different, right? But turns out the way that we orchestrate a container is slightly different. And the tools that end up winning in that orchestration were slightly different. And there was a whole new paradigm in declarative, infrastructure rather than having to orchestrate everything like we did in the days of Puppet or Ansible, right? It was kind of exciting because it was a new kind of workload and all the paradigms were going to change. And KubeCon in like 2015, 2016, 2017, whatever. 2015 might have been too early. Maybe I started in 2016. But early on, it was a whole bunch of nerds sitting around in a room feeling like we're changing the internet and this is fun, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the only place that's also happening is in AI. And AI is, inference servers, the way that we train them, the way that we run them, the way that we audit them, the way security looks in AI. Like it's a new kind of workload that requires a different kind of interaction. It's not that different. It's really, it's just a workload at the end of the day, and you box it up in some kind of wrapper at the end of the day, but there's interesting problems because the things that go in it don't come out in the same way. And the things that come out don't come from the same places. And, so auditing that, life cycling that, et cetera, is just, it's new, it's interesting. And the people who are working hard to solve those problems, I think are having a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's definitely different enough that I think there's ML ops community and there's these which is basically was DevOps or whatever you want to call it prior, like whatever operations look like.
Well, which was platform engineering prior, which was, Linux sysadmin before, which was
lots of titles in the cloud,
If you go back far enough, it was a lot of guys writing a lot of awk. Just saying.
Good point.
Yeah. Anyways, keep going.
And they still might be the ones, the old graybeards still using their awk where it makes sense. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say there are differences. Can you mentioned security. Can you enumerate perhaps what makes it different? Why would there be a subculture that comes out of this? It's just compute and data, right? Like what makes it different enough?
Yeah. It should just be compute and data. Okay, so a concrete example, a friend of mine, this morning in the CTO Lunches community, a friend of mine works at a very large, very regulated industry, and he's a VP at this big company, and he's arguing that their company can't use any AI products, and it's super frustrating. I think just today Shopify tweeted something like, it should be a reflex to use AI, and that is the absolute standard for all of our engineers at this point. And so this friend who's at VP is like, well, how do I get to that when I'm in a company where I can't use any of it? So there are some solutions solutions that have come out that address it from his perspective. And I'm gonna start there, and I'm gonna come back to the infrastructure bit. But from his perspective, the things are who's putting what where, right? And when you have a company like his that's big and super well regulated and everything's blocked, you know what people do? They pull out their phone and they type something into ChatGPT. So now they're putting data that they shouldn't be putting into the big public models that are probably they've got the free version. So the big public models are training off them. So that's the worst possible outcome, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a company, an old coworker of mine is one of the early engineers at, called SurePath AI. I don't know if you've heard of this, but SurePath AI sits in between, almost like a proxy. They for a big company like this, so that every single thing that goes to, say, ChatGPT, they can stop and say, oh, that has PII in it, and they redact it so ChatGPT doesn't even get it. So when you say, hey, ChatGPT, who is Jerod from the changelog? It's going to say, hey, you said, who is name from the changelog? Did you mean to give me a name? It seems more like a placeholder, right? Like that's going to be the actual response from ChatGPT, because they're going to intercept that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so there's those kinds of cases. Now there gets to be more interesting edge cases there that like, well, I want HR to be able to use AI and train on enough of our data internally that they can ask the AI, like, give me a list of all the salespeople, and it can do it, because that's going to increase their productivity. But I don't need finance to have access to that. And I definitely don't want HR to have access to what finance has access to, right? So there ends up being fine-grained security there, even if you're self-hosting those models. So that's one thing. The next thing is, when you're talking about even just self-hosting a model without a product like SurePath, and this is not an endorsement for SurePath. The guy that works there is a good friend of mine. I think very highly of him, and I hope they're making a kick-ass product. I've never used it, so I don't know, and I can't vouch for it. But the folks that are building something internal have to look at it, and how do you audit what the model's been trained on? How do you audit what the model's learned? How do you audit who's had access to that model? How do you audit if a malicious actor got in and started asking questions to that model? That's not that different from just looking at audit logs of a traditional server of any kind, right? But there ends up being some unique challenges there, and especially when you life cycle those servers, those inference servers, and you have a new model on it, or you put in some new training data. Who had access to the new training data? When did that training data go in? Now what did they have access to? The problems actually get pretty interesting. Yeah. And the rabbit hole goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
I say it seems like they snowball and kind of fractal off even to now you're multiplying problems against each other.
Well, and when you're using AI to detect what you shouldn't be doing, or you should, and that's the other thing that AI is really good at, is AI can watch you type a name in and go, oh, that's a name, right? Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be saying that. So where does that model live? Who's hosting that one? Who's auditing that one? I mean,
who watches
this is a whole new world, and the people who are missing out on the AI gold rush, because there's a lot of us are Luddites over in the corners going, oh, this is one step farther than I want to go. OpenStack was enough, and we tempted fate when we trained the computers, and
all I need is a command prompt and awk. That's all I need.
See, you get me, Jerod. Now I need to be better at regex if awk is going to be all I'm going to do, because there's a anyways,
so say we all.
But this is where all the fun is, and there is a whole bunch of things changing. It's also the only companies with money right now.
Right. Yeah, I was expecting you would say that eventually. It's like, well, this is where the money is, so why not be involved in the exciting thing where the money is? Just kind of makes sense.
Well, so Civo has a AI offering that is actually pretty compelling. It's a private AI offering so that you can, be comfortable with your data. And then this other company in San Francisco that I'm working with, Tensorlake, that does understanding of unstructured documents. It's actually really fascinating for me. And I'm learning a lot. I'm excited to be in the AI world because that is where things are moving. And I'm surprised how much I'm learning about it. I end up having conversations with ChatGPT every day. Yesterday I was asking a million questions about MCP servers and or MCP, it's protocol or whatever.
Model context protocol.
Yeah, thank you. How does this work? Why does it work? What are the limitations? How does it interact with a browser? How does it interact with AWS? Is it going to write this kind of code for me or do this kind of interaction for me? And it's, just things the rabbit hole always goes deeper.
It does. It does. And I was just going to ask how much you're using these tools in your own work, because you have so many disparate tasks, it sounds like, lined up for any given day that do you tell the AI, please spell Jerod's name wrong for me as I send this email out? Or how do you, how much are you using these tools in your work?
What's interesting is, so for internal things, I actually feel like ChatGPT has just recently, and I mostly use ChatGPT. I dabbled with Claude and a couple of the other things. At Civo, I use Civo's models, which are llamas that we're hosting. But ChatGPT just in the last few months feels like it's crossed over from, hey, I need an outline on XYZ problem. What should I think about that I haven't maybe thought about? And it would give me, one or two decent ideas, and the rest of it would kind of be fluff. And now it's so good at it that I'm regularly thinking I'd be stupid not to use this, right? And so a lot of times I'll type up a few things. Hey, here's the 10 things I'm thinking about as it relates to this problem. What am I missing? And it will structure a few of the things that I put together into the same category and then give me new categories. I have it set up to be extremely obscenely brief, which is funny because I'm being obscenely verbose on this podcast. But in life, I value brevity a lot. And I have it set up to always prompt me with, here's what you didn't ask that you probably should have asked. And so at the end of every single response, it says, you should ask this. And it surprises me how often it catches things that I didn't think. So to give you a concrete example, and the short answer is I'm using it all the time. It's just completely gone through the roof. But just in the last month, I kept trying to use it, and I couldn't find times and spaces where it made sense. And now it's become a second nature for me. But I had done a write-up on a bunch of things that needed to happen in this one organization at this one company. And I fed it in and said, make this better. And it said, at the bottom, there was this one section where I said, here's some of the problems that I'm seeing. And ChatGPT said, if you want to sound like a senior executive, don't express the problems. Talk about how you're working to address the problem. Don't just bring them up. And I was like, this is embarrassing. I should 100% know this, should 100% be interacting this way. And it slapped me on my hand before I went and took that to the person I, was turning it into. And that was for me, I think the eye-opening, I'm stupid every time I don't do this, because it's so good.
It's like an outbound filter more than anything else. It's just before I go
comes
outbound.
Up with, it comes up with categories I don't think about. It comes up with, it gives me feedback on my writing that I didn't think about. It tells me to be more brief because I'm overly verbose in my writing. Even today I asked it to put together a couple lists for me. Hey, I need a list of this kind of company doing this kind of thing, and I want 50 of them. It takes 20 seconds. It's wild.
It is. It really is. Now, does it name your liquors for you, or you do those yourself?
So thus far, we have a very long spreadsheet of potential names. I will say the generative AI is amusing because I popped into the CTO Lunches. We have the free group that's 1,600 CTOs that all meet for lunches all over the world, right? And then we have a paid group that's a small community that hangs out in a Slack. And right before we launched the whiskey, I went to the group and said, hey, I have a couple of ideas for the whiskey name, and here's what I think it's going to be. And one of the people in CTO Lunches said, well, what about generative AI? And that ended up being what we use. So
now, do they get a commission on that, or?
He's asked for a commission. I think I gave him a bottle.
I
promised him a bottle. So if I haven't given him a bottle, you know who you are, Topher.
Give him that $1,400, that special edition.
That special edition. I hand wrote the number on all of them. I'm holding bottle 22 right here. So
that's cool. That's cool. Gosh, you're really selling.
They're all
me.
small batch.
I'm wanting one of those. Dang it. Now you price anchored me. I'm thinking 125, affordable.
Feels like no big deal. Yeah. Just knock on the door. Would you like to buy a $50,000 vacuum? No? Well, great, because I've got $100 vacuum.
So can you, I know you haven't, these are probably a private spreadsheet, but can you humor us? Can you workshop a few options out there? Maybe give a reaction.
Let me see if I can. I think that I might not be willing to share.
Okay. Take a moment and review. Maybe give me your bottom half, don't give me any of the real good ones. Give me what ChatGPT would spit out.
Pull it up real quick. Let's see.
Because that's what I found specifically with creative work is that ChatGPT is so mid on everything. It's supposed to be funny 100%. Or ironic or tongue in cheek. Like, it's like, no, dude, like the cheese ball factor is at 10 and they can't quite do anything funny, but boring prose is fine.
Okay. So I opened it up. There is a number in here that I'm happy to share.
All right, let's do it.
So we thought about earring for a gin.
Say that again. I missed it. I missed it entirely.
Engineering, but the gin is all capitalized.
Gotcha.
One thing that I definitely hope that we do is I want to have a vodka that we sell, and it's 2 different labels. It's the exact same fucking vodka, and you can only buy them in a box set. And one is called tabs and one is called spaces because it's vodka and they're both empty. And I love this idea.
I like that one.
I think we will get there eventually. We have emergency response or incident response emergency kit.
Okay.
As a name, we have. I did SOC 2 and all I got was this stupid bottle of whiskey. There's one of my favorites is actually I work in computers because I think for the people who aren't in tech but want to buy a gift for their person who does work in tech, I mean, most of them don't know why force push is funny, and they're like, it's
almost too inside. Anything,
yeah, maybe it's inappropriate and they don't know what to buy. So I work in computers as the gift to give to the tech person, I think is really funny.
I do like that one.
Yeah. So we've got a lot more. I'm saving the good ones.
Yeah, I would too. Why waste them on a silly podcast?
I mean, it started with a Friday deployment was one of the names of the liquors, and we later decided that was going to be the name of the company, Friday Deployment Spirits, because you want to get in that Friday deployment spirit. Either you don't want to deploy on Friday, or you have to deploy on Friday, and you're going to need to drink.
That's right. So might as well be some gin.
That's exactly right.
I'm actually.
What else do you want to talk about, Jerod? Anything else that I haven't covered?
I just wondering how you like gin. Personally, I think gin's disgusting, and it tastes like a pine tree. So.
Oh man, that's exactly right. That's what you're missing.
You like to drink pine trees. Well, you are from Colorado, so a lot of pine trees out there.
There you go. Well, when I was a kid, my dad would drink gin occasionally, and I would smell it, and I was like, "That smells disgusting." And he'd be like, "Have a sip," and I'd take a little sip, and I'd be like, "That's disgusting. That's disgusting." And I remember growing up and being like, "Is that the one that tastes like pine needles? Ew, no!"
Exactly.
And then I became an adult, and I had some pine needles, and I was like, "This is amazing."
What changed?
I don't know.
Same taste. Yeah, it's weird.
For what it's worth, Jerod, our gin has some juniper in it, and you can tell, but it also has a lot more going on. So if you're not a big juniper guy and you want to try a G&T that you might be really excited about,
all right.
But I like it. What,
if you send me a bottle, I'll give it a try.
If I send you a bottle, will you do an entire hour and a half episode where you just sit there and drink it and then give a review of it that gets increasingly unhinged as you get farther and farther through the bottle? Because then I will send you 2 bottles.
I can get you halfway there. Well, I don't like the taste of gin, so I can't promise I'm going to drink it for 90 minutes, But I will I will try it on the show, and I'll talk with and maybe send one to Adam. We could have a drink, and we could maybe do a review. Probably not 90 minutes, but I could do something with it.
I believe you can stretch it to 45 minutes. I will 100% send you a bottle of liquor if you do a review on the changelog.
All right. Thus closes my sales pitch.
So wait, we came into this hoping to have a bubbly conversation. You got a little bit of that, and you're going to end with a bottle. You want the whiskey too. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, I actually do like whiskey, whereas gin I don't like. So
do you like rye whiskey?
Probably. I'm not a connoisseur. But what's the difference? Okay. Like what's rye specific?
Rye is more peppery. It's a kind of different. I mean, I guarantee you've had rye whiskeys if you're a whiskey drinker, and you might just not, unless you try a rye next to a wheat, you might not notice the big differences. But,
fair. I don't have an advanced palate. I do know that I prefer bourbon. And I
don't have a refined palate either, and I make liquor for a living, so it's cool. Sorry, keep going. What were you saying?
No, I was just gonna say I generally like bourbon, which I think has more of a sweetie, more sweet than peppery. But
yeah, Yeah, it's the corn gets sweet, but also a little bitter. A wheat one is like really smooth and sweet too.
Okay.
But a wheat makes bourbon feel downright offensive. If you drank wheat whiskey for a week and you tried bourbon again, you'd be like, whoa, because it's got so much stronger of a kick.
Gotcha. So it's way smoother.
Yeah.
And a rye is going to be in the middle.
I mean, a rye, it depends on what the other grains are in it. The rye tends to be more like I say pepper in part because it's a little bit of a spice that's sort of added on to whatever the other flavors are that are going on. So
Gotcha.
You can have a very sweet one with a rye kick. You can have a bourbon with a rye kick.
Well, let's, I'm excited. I'm excited for these
I'm excited you're excited.
I wish Adam was here because he's actually more of the whiskey guy than I am. He's got all the stuff you just said. He would have been saying the same thing.
Just make him feel guilty.
It's true.
Guilt covers a multitude of wrongs. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, Kendall, awesome meeting you. Great speaking with you. Anything?
Thanks for having me.
Anything you were wishing I'd ask you and I never did, and you're like, gosh, this guy's a dope. I've been waiting the whole time.
I mean, I think the obvious question that you didn't ask is how can a man be so friendly and look so good and be so humble? And I just don't have an answer to that. But
some of the world's mysteries will just have to be left as such.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yep. Thank you.